In this series, we're affirming the principle that we can meaningfully study anything in whatever system of numbers we choose. And I'm choosing threeness to study the Holy Trinity, whose principles of freedom, evolution, and creativity. In other words, you just do whatever, and yet you meet resistance and evolve through processing that resistance. And then that evolution gives rise to the need for seeing things a bit differently. When we think about trial and error, the trial is really freedom, just do whatever you fancy. The error is the feedback you get. In other words, how you evolve through processing the objection. The third feature here that we're studying today is the creativity principle, where you know what you want because you feel it, and you know you can't have it because there's resistance. So you come to terms with that. You kind of make it up differently. And if you think about that fundamental idea when applied to the fundamental aspect of life, father, mother, and baby, then you've got this image of typically, I'm overdoing it here just for purposes of explanation, but let's say a man wants a son to carry on his name and has a woman upon which to sire that son. And the woman says, well, look, I've got a point of view here. I want it to be my way. And so you've got this fundamental difference between freedom and evolution. The man wants it to be his way indefinitely throughout history, and the woman is saying, come on, get real here. You don't grow by just doing the same old. So that's the second principle. And the third principle is the child itself. Now, the child principle is creativity. It's going to be a bit of the father and a bit of the mother, and yet it's going to be its own self, and try and work out how to be uniquely self-centered when trying to balance father's and mother's requirements. So we see father, mother, child as being a fundament in life. Freedom, evolution, creativity. And we're applying that fundamental principle to whatever we want. And I'm wanting to apply it to the tarot deck. So the 21 cards that we're studying 3 by 3 are, in the first series, the Magician, the Priestess, and the Empress. And we're looking at the Empress today. Now, these 3 form a Holy Trinity, whereas the Magician is free to do whatever it wants because it's got this ability to manipulate the elements of life very dexterously and without any sort of compunction about right or wrong, no morality there. Whereas the Priestess, the divine feminine, the Shekinah, not the divine feminine in the sense that also the Empress is, but the sort of the sense of wisdom and containment and the cauldron of physicality and form, as well as wisdom and sacredness, that kind of sense of holding what might be and making it real, like the womb of the mother, on the one hand. Now, we go a bit further with the Empress, also the divine feminine, but in this case, the shaping process within the womb that makes the child come to be exactly what it is on that fundamental level. So we're talking about creativity, we're talking about physicality, and the greening process of the earth is implied here. And the Empress, in the Sufi understanding, would equate to the principle of Zamrada, the emerald, the idea of gnosis, where ideas, knowledge that come from the mind, a more masculine approach, are not wisdom until they're embodied in sacredness, and this is the High Priestess. And then we get to the Empress. It's like, what can we do with that? Those two very fundamental principles of freedom and sacred evolution. How do we make that work in the world of real things? And the Empress shows us how. And it's the principle of fundamental creativity. Now, concepts of this kind are really helpful up to a point, but I want to go beyond that point of intellectualizing wisdom. And most esoteric studies do that. Most astrologers do that. They intellectualize the ideas behind the planets, and they don't really get to terms with what that means in real life. Now, I want to try and do that with the tarot, particularly with everything I do. What does it mean to have the Empress energy flowing within you, operating within you? Well, it means that you're creative. You see a situation and you create your interpretation. And you notice that that actually substantively creates the required outcome. In other words, perception is a creative act. If we come to understand this very deeply as a practice, not only an occasional spiritual practice, but a definite practice of how we respond to situations all of the time, then we find ourselves able to make up the narrative of our lives. So I see that the magical power given to the Empress is exactly that, of making up the narrative. Here we are on Earth, perceiving life in a unique way. However, we're told how to perceive it by forces that want us to be like them, or to do what they want us to do, rather than to find our own creative, unique expression of spirituality and oneness and life itself. And the difference between following the rules, doing the same as everyone else has done in the past, on the one hand, and feeling free to create, just to make up your own story, on the other, the difference between those two things is the difference between enslavement and freedom. So here we have the freedom principle of the magician evolving through the high priestess and turned into a creative expression of that evolved freedom. Wisdom expressed as a life narrative. Now, what do I mean by narrative? I'll give you an example which might illustrate the thing. I had a vision once. I didn't have visions or anything like that until I was a certain age, and then I had a vision after a very profound meditation. This was in 1987, and I saw a unicorn, and it was like in a dream. I just saw this unicorn climbing up a hill and healing people, and I saw that the unicorn represented the principle of healing, and I should adopt it as a totem or power animal. So I did that, and I thought the way to do that, I surrounded myself with unicorn images. I bought all the postcards that I could find in the shops. I had about 300 of them. I obsessed about unicorns, and I invented a unicorn meditation, which would be a sound centered in the third eye, a visualization of the beast itself, the sacred beast. I got some unicorn incense from Glastonbury, and I tasted it and I burned it, and I made a gesture with my hand as though I was developing a unicorn horn. So I developed a meditation, and I immersed myself in a unicorn in order to affirm that I was claiming it as a power animal, as a totem, as an archangel in support of me. I found out later that there is no significant difference, archetypally shall we say, between the Archangel Michael and the unicorn. So I was aligning with an archangelic archetype. Like, that's pretty high stuff. And it was a powerful event. I had never written a story in my life before, and I started writing, and I wrote a story of a unicorn. And I thought it would be a children's story, and it had a troll in it, and a Sufi, and all sorts of. It was in a forest, and there was this innocent girl, and that was the storyline. And I read this story out to my friends who were in the community that I lived in. And one of the women there said, "Oh, we'll do a camp. We'll all meet together and we'll do a camp, and we'll act out this story." And that's what we did, and that actually gave rise to unicorn camps, which 30 years later is still going on. More than 30 years. However, the point of the story is this, that when we were going down to Penzance in Cornwall to do the camp, I saw in the harbour a boat, a catamaran, red catamaran, with the same name as my protagonist, which was a particularly unusual name, Zaruman, spelt with a Z, you know. It was like shocking. And then I saw the narrative of my story enact itself in real terms. There was a little girl who had a birthday on the same day as the girl in my story, and we did turning like a dervish, a Sufi, and everything in the book came to life in the camp. And I had a shocking realization of the power of narrative. I came to realize that you can write your own story. Now, it's not without some constraints and some understandings of magic principles. This whole thing was magical. It was synchronous. It was intentionally magical. The camp scene was that the unicorn is a magical beast, and so on. So the atmosphere of magic and the intentionality of magic was present within the narrative. But I came to realize that I discovered a superpower here, and certain things were happening in my life that I didn't want to continue, or I wanted to transform into something else. And I just wrote short stories about them. And I would, first of all, accurately write about the situation in hand. You have to honestly, completely honestly, record the facts of the matter. And if you're trying to change a quality of yourself, you have to be honest about the negative aspect of that, thing that you don't like. You can't pretend. You can't let ego, pride get in the way. So you write the honest conditions of the situation that you want to change in detail as a felt experience. You have to mean it. So you have to immerse yourself in the story of the wrongness, shall we call it, and then just weave a tale and have the storyline meet your requirements, resolve it in the way you want it resolved, and apply it as a magical tool, bless it in a sacred ceremony, speak of it, talk it up, think of it all of the time, give it some energy, energize your story. It may be possible to leave it and let it work itself out in its own time. That also probably work. But if you energize it, it seems to be you're investing in it. Now that story becomes a spell. In a sense, that's what is a spell. And a spell is like an affirmation or a prayer. They're very similar things. So the qualities of this are to get yourself into the right state of being, which is a state of goodness and sacredness and power and magical intention. You get into that state as you write your narrative, and see it as a light-hearted but clearly sincere affirmation, prayer for what will happen in the future. So that's the power of narrative. Now, we don't have to limit that to a story writer's ability. In every situation, you can perceive what's going on according to your own life narrative. Because building on this idea of story writing and creating results in the world, you can write the story of who you are and become the hero of that story. And what fascinates you, what books you read, what anecdotes you learn of, what models you have in other people, what examples there are to follow in life, you can write your narrative as the journey towards that. So a typical process of self-unfoldment, which is the fundamental principle of the Empress, I would say, unfolding yourself creatively, therefore unfolding your life situations creatively. It's the same thing. We are nothing more than mirrored by our situations. Who I am creates and is mirrored by that which I find myself in environmentally, in the environment of my being. So we rewrite the story of who we are by a particularity of process. We find something to admire, and we look at the qualities associated with that thing or person. Let's take a person as a better example. If you find someone admirable, there's a good reason for that. It might be because they're gentle, or because they're a good singer, because they have money, or they have a wonderful taste in clothes. Whatever it is your thing for admiring someone, you're going to admire them for a reason. Now, if you can find out what are the qualities inherent within that reason for your admiration, then you have the secret ingredient. Those are the qualities inherent within you as potential. Now, the narrative of your life story is like an affirmation. I am these qualities, as yet undiscovered, as yet not realized. However, I cannot admire those qualities in someone else if they do not exist within myself. That's the understanding you need, and that's just clear spiritual philosophy. You can't project an admiration onto anything or anyone unless you have that quality within you to do the projecting with. Makes sense, doesn't it? So when you admire someone's success, it's because you have that potential. Now, there are people who get churlish about that, unappreciative. And they're, particularly in Ireland where I live, they have this concept which they call begrudgery. I've never heard the word before I moved here. Begrudgery. They begrudge someone else's success. Well, that won't work. That's not good principle. It's not a good idea for a magician to be envious, or well, not envious, that's the wrong word, but to begrudge someone else's success. Being envious is actually good. I see that, I want that, I'll have that. That's how children grow. They are envious of their parents' qualities. So envy as a magical tool is good, although as a poison dart, of course, it's not. That's begrudgery then. Begrudgery is corrupted envy, to be honest. So, if you admire someone's qualities, you have them within yourself. That's the fundamental confident wisdom to claim. So then you write your story, your narrative around that, and you create yourself according to the idea that you're moving towards the realization of those qualities. And you don't let go. You just carry on improving and improving and improving. Like with music, I've never been a good guitar player all my life, and yet I've really wanted to be able to play like the people I see, and I've just hung out with them, and I've tried. I bought a guitar and I tried. And bit by bit by bit, 5 minutes, 10 minutes every day for a very, very long period of years, I tried. And eventually my narrative became, I'm a man with a guitar, therefore I'm a guitar player, therefore I'm a musician, therefore I can play music. That was my narrative. And eventually I got to be able to play guitar properly. You could do this with anything. And I think another feature of this principle taught by the Empress card is the promotion of beauty. The Empress perceives beauty in everything, and we may have to redefine what we know by the understanding of the word beauty. It's not just aesthetic taste. It's not just I prefer this to that. That's my sense of what looks beautiful. It's different from yours. It's not simply a characteristic quality of your personality. It's very much more than that. It's a spiritual principle. In Sufism, it is suggested that the perfection of love is harmony. And the perfection of harmony is beauty. So we're talking about the perfecting of love, real distillation of the essence quality of love in beauty. So beauty takes on this profound spiritual importance, and we come to understand eventually that those people that really yearn for ugly things, like money-grabbing people, ambitious people, people who want power and that kind of thing, without thinking of it as beautiful, without wanting beauty in their lives, they do get what it is they yearn for and admire. And they typically get to find that it isn't right, it isn't enough. I haven't ever found somebody who wanted lots and lots of money without noticing that they want a lot more money even when they've got a lot. You can't seem to satisfy somebody's hunger for money or even position. There's certain things that you can admire that they're not beautiful and they don't work. There is something about yearning for beauty which is the same as yearning for God. Beauty is like a signpost to God. I'm not talking about the glamour of shallow prettiness or, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about beauty, because beauty feels good and is inevitably in accordance with nature. There's certain harmonious lines and shapes and feelings and tones, and the feeling of beauty is associated with love and harmony. Now, if you protect your narrative by surrounding it with beauty, if you make sure it's sacred and in alignment with nature, the green, the gnosis principle of thinking it's right, but also feeling it's right, knowing that this is in accordance with harmony and the plan of the goddess and the gods. If you can introduce that into your narrative, then when you get what it is that you want, it will feel good. It will be the end of the itch that you've been scratching. It will go away. Whereas if you don't include beauty, it probably won't. It will be a replication of hunger lust, which you don't want. You want to end this yearning for beauty and God. That's the Empress, according to my take on it.